Welcome back to the Deep Dive series. Today we're taking a look at the Miami Hurricanes. Mario Cristobal has done a pretty good job in terms of bringing in talent, whether that's recruiting, the transfer portal. This has been a fun team to watch under his tenure. It's not without, some controversy or some drama on the field, but you're looking at a team that is poised and ready to make a run at a college football playoff appearance, potentially a national championship. They believe that they have the guys in place, and we're going to dive in that today. This is a team that in 2024 came up short of the college football playoff, and obviously they want to improve that in 2025. Now, you have a coaching change on the defensive coordinator position. You bring in Corey Heatherman. It obviously wasn't working out. Mario Cristobal has even said that. He said on Josh Page's show that they needed to make a change defensively, kind of lost their way, and now they're looking to improve. Now, Heatherman, if you look at his defenses at Minnesota, you look at what he did there, this is a guy who knows what he's doing, and it'll be fun to see how he gets to operate with a little bit more talent. Don't get me wrong, Minnesota had plenty of talent on their roster, especially on that defensive side of the ball, but they did not have the depth that Miami does. And obviously, we'll dive into that depth here today. Heatherman running that defense gives this team a lot of excitement, gives the fan base a lot of hope for what the 2025 season could be. Shannon Dawson is back. He's going to have a new quarterback with Cam Ward going first overall in the NFL draft. That shouldn't be a problem. I think that the quarterback they got will make things a pretty smooth in terms of a transition. So you're not going to have to worry too much about putting points on the scoreboard when it comes to your quarterback position. Maybe the wide receivers that he throws to will be a little bit of a question, but I think that they're still in a good position with who they bring in. And this is an offense that I think has a lot of potential in 2025. Now, obviously, with the transfer portal era, you're going to see plenty of change. And for Miami, you saw a lot of NFL talent depart. Cam Ward is obviously one of them. We talked about him. Biggest reason why they were so successful last year was Cam Ward. I don't think there's going to be too many arguments against that. You also lose three receivers here. You lose a ton of talent, and you lose three to the NFL. You lose Isaiah Horton to Alabama. But then, Xavier Restrepo, Samuel Brown, and Jacoby George go to the NFL. That speaks volumes to your ability to develop those guys into NFL talent. Elijah Arroyo, tight end, another target for Cam Ward, is gone. Damian Martinez, the running back, is gone. So just looking at that tells you that there is plenty of replacements that are needed offensively. The defense isn't without some needs as well, but I think they feel pretty good about what they have coming back. Tyler Barron was pretty good for them as kind of a rental in the transfer portal. He's off to the NFL. Francisco Mauigoa is off to the NFL as well. So you feel pretty good about the talent you lost because you're doing a good job of developing it. You obviously want to have them back, but it's a world where you can't always get what you want. You have to eventually move on. You have to move on from some of these players, and you have to find a way to somehow replace them. Now, they do bring in quite a bit of talent as well, and I think that they feel really good about where they thrived in the transfer portal. And Mario Cristobal has done a really good job of identifying talent to take over for what they lost. Now, the quarterback position, you bring in Carson Beck. We'll dive in more to him in a little bit. CJ Daniels is an interesting addition. I don't necessarily know if he translates as a one-to-one replacement for somebody, but he is definitely someone with plenty of potential. Same with Keelan Marion. That's a dynamic threat for this offense. Tony Johnson was kind of a surprise add in the transfer portal. And then also tight end Alex Bauman, he was a really fun player for Tulane, and he is going to be an interesting depth piece for this tight end position. So we're really excited to see what this team is capable of doing offensively. You also bring in a ton of talent defensively. You did a good job. I think this staff did a good job of identifying talent in the secondary that's going to contribute right away, whether that's starting or as depth pieces. Ethan O'Connor, Charles Brantley, Zechariah Poyser. You also got Jacoby Thomas late in the transfer portal. Same with Mohamed Torrey. You have guys that are going to make a really big contribution for this team. And it's a secondary that I think has some younger guys that are ready to step up, potential rising stars. So it'll be fun to see how that group shakes out, how their talent that they brought in shakes out. But nonetheless, this is a team that still has returning talent. And you combine the guys they bring in to that returning talent, you feel like they're in a great position for the 2025 season. And we'll dive into one of those guys they bring in here in 2025. Carson Beck, a lot on his shoulders, but I also think he needed a change. His time at Georgia was full of ups and downs, and this is a staff who really thinks that they got a guy that's going to be not as probably as good as Cam Ward, but they think that he has the talent to lead them where they want to be in 2025. Now he's got to learn a new system. He's got to learn some new wide receivers, and there's plenty of new faces in that wide receiver room. But I also think that when Carson Beck was healthy, he was one of the better quarterbacks in college football. And I think that there were some injuries that might have affected him. There was obviously inconsistent play, but I think that a lot of college football media was pretty critical of the offense that he was in. That wasn't exactly the friendliest offense, if you will. I think there are people that would argue with that, and that maybe led to some of that as well. But he obviously needed a new home. Georgia's okay with moving on to Gunnar Stockton, and Miami benefits from Carson Beck going to the transfer portal. He ends up at Miami and joins the roster that, again, has plenty of talent and it should be really fun. Now, maybe there are concerns about the depth behind him. Emory Williams is back, an experienced guy in terms of understanding the culture at Miami. He's been here. He knows what it takes. Luke Nickel could be another depth piece. That's where depth maybe is a concern. You really want Carson Beck to be healthy if you're going to have a chance at running towards a college football playoff appearance. So you really hope that, like I said, Beck is healthy and is capable of staying on the field and making plays, because you maybe don't have as much trust in Williams or anybody else behind him. But we'll see. I don't necessarily know how much we're going to see those other two unless Beck gets hurt. And obviously we saw last year that Beck had some injuries that he had to deal with. But I think that he gives you the best chance to win. He is, I think people are kind of sleeping on him in a way, because when you look at his film from last year, there were plenty of games where he made, he had bigger games than I think people realize. I think he made some big time throws, and I think people are just kind of diving into the narrative that we saw last year, which was more towards the negative side for Carson Beck. So maybe a change of scenery is exactly what he needs. The running back position should be really interesting to watch. There's plenty of depth. They bring in Shamar Brown from NDSU, and that's a crazy transition to go from NDSU to Miami. And if you go and watch Brown's film from his time with the Bison, this is a guy who was running in between the tackles, making guys miss left and right in a crowded environment. NDSU is running that pro style. I don't even know if you call it pro style necessarily, but they're running a power offense where they are going to load up on offensive linemen, fullbacks, tight ends. They are going to pack the box, and the defense is going to do the same. He was making guys miss. He was making big plays in that offense. Now you put him on Miami, where they're going to spread things out, and you're giving him less people to have to beat, less tackles to break. You feel like you have a guy who could be a potential star in this offense if he can handle that transition from the FCS to a Power 4 program. Mark Fletcher is going to be the guy, though. Mark Fletcher will be the starter. He is someone that is ready for his opportunity. We saw that a little bit last year, and holy cow, 6'2", 225 pounds, a guy who is definitely capable of handling life in the ACC. And with the wide receivers kind of needing time to sort things out, the rushing attack actually might be leaned upon early to make that transition. Now, if Brown isn't the backup option right away, Jordan Lyle definitely will be. And Jordan Lyle will still be part of that rotation regardless. Averaged 7.4 yards per carry last year. That's a guy who is ready to show that he can take on a bigger role in this offense. That's really good depth. And maybe this staff thought, hey, our passing attack is going to take a little bit of a step back. We need our rushing attack to be up to speed or better to start the year. And that's why you go out and you get a Shamar Brown. That's why you bring back guys like Jordan Lyle. Maybe Gerard Pringle Jr. is going to be someone that steps in and contributes right away too. I think you need that rushing attack to be better than 31st, which is not bad by any means. But I think you need it to be better because the passing attack more than likely takes a little bit of a step back. Again, it's not going to fall off completely, but I think that this offense is going to need to run the ball a little bit more than they did in 2024. And like I said, part of that has to do with a new quarterback. You have new wide receivers. That's going to take some time to gel with each other. And Beck's obviously been dealing with an injury in the spring. So there's been less time for them to get acquainted. Now, maybe you can get in the film room, you can get into the playbook together, but there is something to be said about doing it on the field. So you're going to have to wait probably till fall till we see what that looks like. For now, it's what are they going to do in the offseason? Will they get together and work outside of practices and whatnot? That'll be a big question, but this group is not lacking talent by any means. CJ Daniels, like I mentioned before, is probably the big wild card here. I don't necessarily know what he's going to be able to do. Goes from Liberty to LSU, only has 480 yards last year, but I think that he is a really fun option for this offense. I think he fits really well, and I think that he is ready to prove himself once again. Keelan Marion was a huge get for this team. I think that BYU was happy that he didn't enter necessarily right away, but then maybe he realized that, hey, I got a big opportunity here and I'm going to take it. And his numbers don't look like they're crazy, but this is a guy who not only is going to be a really fun wide receiver, but he's also going to be a dynamic returner in the special teams game. This is a guy who had just 18 kick returns last year, but turned that into 472 yards. That's 26.2 yards per return, and he had 2 touchdowns. So he knows what to do when the football's in his hands. And if I trust someone to create plays for an explosive playmaker or find a way to get that explosive playmaker the ball and let him make big things happen, it's going to be Shannon Dawson with Keelan Marion. I trust that he's going to know what to do, how to get Carson back to throw him the ball. And you're also going to give him opportunities to touch the ball in special teams. That's a big time get for this team. It gives you a threat in multiple areas in any game. JoJo Trader is someone who I think they're ready to see take a step forward. There was a lot of excitement surrounding him in 2024, and they're expecting big things from him in 2025. That is something that we are ready for, and I think that he is ready for that opportunity. It was hard, you have the 4 wide receivers that are basically taking up most of the catches. It's kind of hard to break through. Now he gets his opportunity to showcase what he's capable of doing. We'll see what happens with the depth behind them. Ray Joseph's another option. You bring in Tony Johnson. That was a nice depth piece for this team. He could also be the starter too, but it's still a pretty nice depth piece for this Miami offense. Nye Carr was an interesting entry to the transfer portal, withdrew his name. We'll see what happens with him in terms of his role in the offense. But again, this depth feels like it's in a really good place. Maybe someone of the, Josh Moore, Dalen Upshaw, Malachi Toney, those are guys who could potentially take a step forward as well. So we'll see. I feel pretty good about the talent level in this group. It's just going to be, can you contribute? Can you produce? Then the tight end position. Tight end position is in really good hands. Elijah Lofton is set to have a big year. Only had 9 catches last year, but 16.7 yards per catch, 1 touchdown. Again, like I said, you bring in Alex Bauman from Tulane, a guy who had 212 yards, but had 7 touchdowns. So I think you're looking at a pretty good opportunity for this tight end group to take a step forward and be a major contributor in 2025. Jack Nickel is another one, UAB transfer, a guy who they really like in terms of potential, but potential doesn't obviously make plays. So we'll see what happens with him. But again, I think they feel like they got really good talent in the transfer portal. They return a guy in Lofton that is set to be a potential star for them. And that's really exciting if you're a Miami team. The skill positions really stepped up in a big way last year. Now you're going through a transition, but it gives guys opportunities to showcase their talent. Then you go to the offensive line. This offensive line, I feel extremely confident in heading into this season. This is a group that, like I said, has a ton of opportunities to showcase that they can be one of the best in college football. And obviously, Cristobal's had his hands all over this group in terms of bringing them in, getting them in from the transfer portal, recruiting them. He has done a good job of developing this group. You know, his coaching staff has done a phenomenal job as well. And this could be one of the best groups in college football in the 2025 season. And that's going to be huge, especially when you have a new quarterback, learning a new system, wide receivers needing to get things going, and a rushing attack that is ready to just explode in 2025. Markel Bell and Francis Mauigoa are going to be your tackles. Those are two guys that are absolutely huge. You know, Bell comes in at 6'9", 340 pounds. Mauigoa is smaller, if you will, at 6'6", 315. So you have two tree trunks on the outside protecting your quarterback and paving lanes. Matthew McCoy and Enes Cooper come back. I think that's another good tandem to have. Cooper, 6'6", 350. McCoy is the tiniest one of the four that we've mentioned so far, if you will, but still 290 pounds. But that's a ton of experience coming back. The center position obviously was going to be something they knew they had to replace. Zach Carpenter is gone, but you bring in James Rockermeyer, 12 starts at TCU. Should be a really fun addition to this offense and a really important piece, especially getting chemistry with Carson Beck and finding ways to be successful in a group that is very experienced. He does not have to be a hero, but he does play a vital role in this offense. Snapping the football is obviously extremely important, but also they need him to step up in a big way. Maybe you don't have as much confidence at the center position in terms of depth, but you still have plenty of options. Behind them, you know, this is where you feel really good about the starters, but also I think they feel pretty good behind those guys. Now, the interior probably has more questions than the tackle positions. You know, Samson Okunlila could be a really good backup. Whether he gets time this year or not, we'll see. You know, he played 13 games last year, did not start. Tommy Kinsler IV is also another option. So again, the tackle positions have a combined 27 games of experience. They played 23 games last year. So we'll see what happens with that group. But you feel like you have good depth on the edge. Everybody else, though, has a combined 13 games played. So that's where maybe you have some concerns about guys getting opportunities. But this is where sometimes when you don't have experience behind guys, the fact that they're around such an experienced group and such a familiar group with this offense, you almost are like a sponge and you just soak in everything that you hear from these guys. You just absorb so much knowledge that when you get to the field, you feel like you're more prepared. And that's one thing that this group gets. You have a ton of experience ahead of you. You have 2, 3, or 4 guys that have played over 20 games in college football. That is experience that you don't really see everywhere. So learning from those guys, understanding what it takes to be a starter is going to help this group next year and maybe even this year if something goes wrong, if health is a concern, if injuries play a role, we'll see. But right now, you feel extremely confident about what this offense can do because of the guys up front. And there are going to be some battles in practice in the trenches. The offensive line is really good, but this defensive line, I think, is set to have a massive year for Miami. And it's not just because Ruben Bain is back, although this is a guy who could be a top 10 pick when it's all said and done. We will see. I think that last year it felt like he took a little bit of a step back in terms of production. You feel like maybe he needs to take a step forward in 2025, and he's definitely capable of that. But also you have to keep in mind that teams know who he is. This is a guy who's playing on the edge at 6'3", 275 pounds. So he is not by any means tough to miss. Everyone knows who he is. They know what he is capable of doing. And even though the production went down last year, they are not going to treat him any different. The film tells you you need to worry about him. You must send help his way. You must chip him whenever you can, double team him, whatever. He is going to be that good. So a guy like Hakeem Mesidor could have a monster year. He had a pretty good year last year. Honorable mention All ACC with 9 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. Rueben Bain with that attention still had 6 tackles for loss and 3.5 sacks. So this is a guy who's going to be a force, who's going to be a problem. And the depth behind them maybe doesn't have the production, but this team feels really good about what they have in Armando Blount and Marquise Lightfoot. Those are guys who could step and play big rotational pieces, big roles for a defense that is ready to step up in a big way. And like I said, the battles in the trenches in practice when they have them is going to be really fun. The tackle positions are really exciting as well. I've heard a lot of good things about Justin Scott. Ahmad Moten is another guy that's going to have a bigger role this year. And you have really good size on the interior. You bring in David Blay from Louisiana Tech. That's another piece that is going to be really interesting. Can he translate his game from the group of 5 to the power 4? Now, another guy to keep an eye on, Dante Simpson, an incoming freshman. It's going to be hard to see freshmen step up and play right away, but we're seeing that more now in this day and age of college football. So we'll see what happens with that, but I feel really good about this group, but kind of similar to the offensive line. The starters are experienced. You just maybe have some concerns on depth on the interior, maybe even on the edge you have a little bit of concern, but overall this is a group that is going to be really exciting to watch. I have a lot of excitement for this group and what they can do and how they can make this defense better. Because again, this defense, there were good spots. I don't want to say it was all bad. There was definitely good things about this defense, but obviously they felt they needed a change. And when you look at the group that you bring in, the group that you bring back to go into Corey Heatherman's system, which is another thing you have to learn a new system, but Corey Heatherman's system is full of different intricacies of how to play this game. And when you look at what Minnesota did really well is they played as a unit. And when Minnesota played really good football, it's because their defense played as one. They weren't individuals. And maybe at times you felt like Miami's defense had a bunch of individuals trying to play and just couldn't play together. That won't be the case. Corey Heatherman is going to make them play together. And with the talent you have, that is going to be an absolute problem. That is going to be a group that is flying to the football. They're making plays. And if anything, Heatherman's arrival kind of injects some juice into this group and gives them new life, gives them a new meaning and a new purpose. And that's exactly what you need. Again, the offense might need some time to get up to speed. This defense has the ability to hold their ground, hold the fort until that happens. The defensive line will do that. And I think that even though you lose Mauigoa at linebacker, this is a position that's in good hands. Wesley Bissaint is back. He is someone that I think is ready to showcase he can be a leader. But then you also bring in Mohamed Toure really late in the transfer portal, a guy who had a big year at Rutgers, 93 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. Kamal Bonner is another guy that is coming in from the transfer portal. That was a huge get for them. Even before they got Torrey, they felt really good about Kamal Bonner. Jalen Alderman, another guy that could be a contributor as well. So you feel really good about the pieces you have returning. Same with Cam Pruitt, a guy who is definitely capable of making plays. He's proven that in his limited time, but you also brought in some good pieces from the transfer portal, from Rutgers, from NC State. This linebacker position, even when you lose a talented player to the NFL, is just going to reload. And the linebacker position in Heatherman's system is so important. They communicate everything to their defense, the guys in front of them, the guys behind them. This is the group that is going to have a lot put on their plate. And I think you have the experienced players and the talent to make that happen. They feel really good about what they brought in. And these guys are capable of making big plays and making sure that the guys around them are better than they were last year. And this may not be like the most talented group of linebackers that they've ever had, And it may not be one of the best in college football, but this is a group that has the right pieces in place. And that can lead to big years. That can lead to them being better than people expect. And I think a lot of people are looking at this defense as they better step up and they better prove themselves. So there are teams that are going to challenge them. There are teams that are not going to take this defense seriously until they play the game and Miami hits them in the mouth. And they are not going to be happy with the result. And this is a group that was pretty good at stopping the run last year. I think that they could have a big year again, a group that was finished 19th against the run. And that's one thing that Minnesota did really well under Heatherman was stop the run. Now you give to what they think is a better defensive scheme with this talent. They're in great hands. Now the secondary is probably where you think, oh, well, this is a group that needs to be better. And it's kind of easy to see that, and it's easy to just point that out. You lose quite a bit of talent from this group, but this staff did a good job of bringing in players to replace that talent. And maybe I think the fan base feels like they elevated their play, they elevated their talent with the guys they bring in. Now, the lone returning starter, if you will, OJ Frederick Jr., a guy who I think is a rising star for Miami. I think that his best ball is ahead of him. He will be one of the corners. Opposite of him, the Xavier Lucas story was really interesting in the offseason. Comes from Wisconsin. That was a really interesting story to follow as it played out. So he, I think, is talented enough to be someone that plays a major role for this Miami defense, for this Miami secondary in 2025. Then you go behind them. Keontae Scott was originally committed to Houston, goes back in the transfer portal, and Miami snags him right away. He's a guy that is ready to compete. He is a guy who is ready to start. Same thing with Ethan O'Connor. Ethan O'Connor had a big year for Washington State. He is ready to start. So even if you have these two guys in Lucas and Frederick, you feel like you're in good hands because you have two potential starters waiting behind them. That's really good depth, especially in this conference, or even when you get to the college football playoff and some of the teams that you're going to face, some of the offenses you're going to face. Now, the safety position was kind of up in the air a little bit, but they also did a good job of addressing that. Zechariah Poyser is someone who comes in from Jacksonville State, a big year for Rich Rodriguez and the Gamecocks. He could be a big piece for them. Getting Jacoby Thomas, like I said, late in the transfer portal, I think that they feel really good about what they got there. They were excited that he comes in, a major contributor for Tennessee last season, and now he joins a Miami secondary that is looking for guys to step up at the safety position. Depth behind them, Jamari Brown could be one of those guys that is ready to take a step forward. We'll see. Not a ton of experience last year. Markeith Williams had a little bit more of experience, but he is another guy who could contribute right away as well. Bryce Fitzgerald is a really interesting player for Miami. I think that he's a young guy that is ready to prove himself right off the bat and showcase that he could push. But like we mentioned before, at the cornerback position, they're kind of set right now. And unless injuries play a role, you're probably not going to see someone behind them contribute that much. Maybe you need a fifth guy, but right now your top four are really good. And that's going to make it really hard for other players to get on the field. But at the same time, that means you've done a good job of recruiting. You've done a great job of bringing the right players in to make things happen and to make your team better. And that's going to make a run at the college football playoff possible. And the schedule gives you opportunities to make that happen. Now, winning the ACC is the easiest way to make this happen, but we've seen weirder things happen in this 12-team playoff. So you don't necessarily know if that's the only way to get there. The ACC is viewed as down, if you will. So that's going to be kind of hard if you do not win the conference. That being said, this is a group that can definitely go undefeated. I don't think that there's any question about that, about their possibilities. I'm not saying they're going 12-0. I'm saying that they can go 12-0. And that's at their ceiling. Their win total is 9.5. So it's not like this is a low win total. This is a group that, even with transition, is viewed as potentially struggling in 2025. This is a group that expects to be right back where they left off. And that's huge, especially with what this team brings back, what they return, what they bring in from the transfer portal. And a lot of you are feeling the same way. 83% of you think that they're going to finish first through fourth in the ACC, probably at that first or second, I would guess. Couldn't put every place that they'd be in specifically, but 83% of you say first through fourth. 13% say fifth through eighth, and I'm guessing whether they're Florida State, Florida, UCF fans, 5% say 13th through 17th. Now, if that happens, that's going to be a wild ride. If they are absolutely terrible this year, that's going to be probably more surprising than if they make a college football run. That would be, yeah, we're not going to go there because I just don't see that happening. Now, you have to get ready right off the bat. That's the tough part about this schedule. Notre Dame is not going to take things easy. They are going to play with a chip on their shoulder. Losing the national championship game is going to motivate them to be ready. Now, they do have a new quarterback that's going to step into a bigger role, so you don't necessarily know if he is going to be ready right off the bat or if he's going to need some time. How you're going to make that very evident is if you're getting to the quarterback. That defensive line for Miami can take a step, can be better, and they can make that happen right off the bat. They can get this season off to a great start. That's going to be a tough game. Then you have two winnable games at Bethune-Cookman and USF. You have the big game against Florida. That's going to be interesting. What is Florida this year? I don't necessarily know. If we know, that'll be interesting to see what the Gators are. Then you get a week off before you go to Florida State. That's another game of a team that is looking to improve. I don't necessarily know if they're on another level than they were last year, but they're definitely not on the level they were 2 years ago. So that's a team that will be improved. That will definitely be motivated. Miami is going to be, I think, ready for that game, though. Then you get another bye week, and then you're pretty much playing games for the rest of the year. Louisville at home, that's going to be a tough game. Stanford, not necessarily. SMU is a team that's looking to get back to the college football playoff. They are going to be motivated. Miami's probably going to be favored in that game, even though it's on the road. So SMU is definitely going to be ready to play that one. Syracuse could be a surprise, though. I just did their deep dive, and I don't necessarily know if they're going to surprise us once again. NC State's looking to bounce back. Same with Virginia Tech. And then Pitt is a team that I don't think a lot of people know what to expect from the Pitt Panthers this year, but it's going to be a tough season regardless because of the talent that the ACC still boasts. Now, it may not have the ceiling that it once did, but that could change this year. This is a conference that, Clemson's not on the schedule, but Clemson is a team that is going to be competing for the ACC championship. They want to get back to the college football playoff. Miami is up there too. So this is a conference that has the ability to get one, maybe two teams in if they play their cards right, if they win out. And this Miami team is ready to make some noise. They are ready to show people that they're ready to compete. And even with the transfers that they bring in, they think that they brought the right guys in. They feel that they're still a contender, and they're trying to make sure that this year doesn't end like last year.